Senator Durbin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be back with the Appropriations Committees of both the House and the Senate that I've been honored to serve on. I hope we'll make history here in two ways. I hope this will be the last conference committee ever called after a government shutdown. If we can add some provisions in our effort here to put an end to government shutdowns once and for all, count me in. I'm willing to sit down on a bipartisan basis and see if we can achieve that. Secondly, I hope we make history as appropriators. As I've said, it's been my honor to serve on the House and Senate Appropriations Committee. We are given requests by presidents of both political parties, and they want every darn penny of it and don't want any questions asked. But we're empowered and responsible under the Constitution to ask questions. And some of those questions lead to conclusions that perhaps, just perhaps, the president in his request is wrong, or at least needs to explain more to us. You remember what happened last year when the Trump administration asked us for barriers and fences for this fiscal year? They asked for a 20% increase in spending over the previous year, from $1.3 billion to $1.6 billion. 20% is a pretty healthy increase in this day and age in federal government. But we're now facing a new request that was handed to us in January the 6th by the president, and he's increased that request when it comes to fences and barriers, or what he might call a wall, all the way up to $5.7 billion, from $1.6 billion to $5.7 billion. It went from a 20% increase to a 300% increase. Is it time to ask a few questions about whether that money would be well spent, whether we need it for the challenges we face at the border, or whether there are other ways to keep us safe? I think that is our job. Secondly, the president has asked for 750 more border officers. Well, in his mind, responding to the crisis as he sees it, 750 more border officers may sound like not an unusual request. But look back in history and see what this committee's done. The president asked for 7,500 new border officers 2 years ago. He hired a company called Accenture to go find those new border officers. Do you know what the Inspector General of DHS has reported to us? They're paying Accenture a bounty of $44,000 for every new border officer. Starting pay for border officers, $52,000. So here is this incentive of $44,000 to Accenture to find the 7,500 new border officers. How are they doing? They found 33 so far. So when the president asked for 750 more, do we have a responsibility as appropriators to say, but what about the 7,500 we've already approved? You haven't filled those slots. I think those are things we ought to look at. When I had Mr. McAleenan, I mispronounced his name, Mr. McAleenan, who is a career professional at DHS, I asked him, blank check time, Mr. McAleenan, as head of Customs and Border Protection, where would you put the next dollar to keep our border safer? He said, in technology and personnel. I said, be specific. He said, well, when it comes to technology, there's something called a Z portal. A Z portal is one of these non-invasive scanning X-ray devices that can look into vehicles and other things coming into the United States and see if the person driving is lying about what's inside. We can do it without opening the door of the truck. So how many of these Z portal devices do we have? Enough to cover 98% of all rail cars coming into the United States, but only 18% of all cars and trucks. Why is that important? Because we're in the worst drug epidemic in our history. And drugs are flowing across our border in cars and trucks. I think all of us would agree, wouldn't we, Democrats and Republicans, if we can intervene when it comes to narcotics coming into the United States, stop them from coming in at the border, it's in the best interest of everybody in this nation. There is technology that makes sense. Count me in, and I'll bet you we get a strong bipartisan vote for it. And let me close by just saying this narcotics trail is a loop. It comes into the United States, but then what leaves the United States are drug money and weapons down to the cartels and gangs in Mexico and Central America. We're not checking for those. As they leave the United States, we could do a much better job in closing this loop once and for all and making this a safer country. Let me conclude by saying the president may be disappointed if we don't give him everything he's asked for, but if this Appropriations Committee did that, it would be a first in history. We're supposed to use our considered bipartisan judgment to make the right decision for the taxpayers and for the safety of this country. If the choice is between shut up or shut down, we've got to do our constitutional responsibility and avoid a shutdown and make sure we take a careful look at every president's request.